Well, today on World Environment Day, the UN Development Programme in South Africa is reflecting on 25 years of cooperation with the Forestry, Fisheries and Environment Department. The theme of World Environment Day this year is ecosystem restoration. So to discuss this more, I'm joined now by Professor Guy Midgley, a climate scientist at Stellenbosch University. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this evening. So the pandemic has cast the spotlight to just how fragile our environment is. In fact, ecosystem loss has been used to describe the state of our environment. Can you just elaborate for us what ecosystem loss is?
Loss of ecosystems, well, thanks for having me firstly, Faye. Loss of ecosystems really refers to, in the short term, damage by human beings who are transforming ecosystems in order to make them produce more things for them, like food and materials from under the ground. But over the long term, losses of ecosystems can also be caused by a changing climate. So there's a range of things that can cause ecosystems to be damaged and ultimately lost.
I mean, the theme in itself, right? World Environment Day 2021, ecosystem restoration. Exactly what will it take to restore our ecosystem as it is vulnerable at the moment?
Well, I should say firstly that ecosystems have a certain amount of resilience, so that if we work with the forces of nature, with the forces of ecosystems, they will heal themselves. But what we've got to do is to moderate the demands that we place on ecosystems to allow them to do that. And that, already South Africa has many mechanisms for spatial planning processes that allow us to potentially do that. And we've just got to get a lot smarter about how to do that. And because ecosystems really provide massive amounts of support to our economy and to the livelihoods of many people.
Yeah. Well, having a pandemic right now, in the middle of a pandemic, I've got coronavirus infections that are on the increase. Is this indicative of the state of our environment? And are we finding that we are becoming more susceptible to pandemics? A lot of times it's been reported that this is not the last time that we're going to see a pandemic of this nature, that we might actually just adjust to a new world where pandemics are, just the norm. So is this indicative of exactly how we're looking like as an environment?
Quite a contentious issue. We're not 100% sure, but certainly it does appear as though people moving more deeply and engaging more intimately with ecosystems, particularly in the tropics, has started to expose us to various diseases that we were never exposed to before. But I mean, diseases and pandemics have been a part of human society for as long as we've lived together in cities and as communities. So I don't really think that. I think that there are serious issues relating to not necessarily the exposure to pandemics, but issues relating to things like extreme climate events, long-term global warming, and our activities in terms of burning fossil fuels that are exposing us to much more significant risks, which are much more systemic and really threaten to undermine our economies in a very significant way.
Well, Prof, I was also reading that every 3 seconds, the world loses enough forest to cover a football pitch. How significant is this loss? What does it mean?
Well, forests, particularly in the tropics, are a very important way in which we can keep carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So if we destroy forests, we add more CO2 to the atmosphere. But I do think that certainly the Northern Hemisphere seems to be particularly obsessed with reforestation and protecting forests, when in fact, by far, the largest source of our problem is fossil fuels. And we can't really rely on ecosystems to pull us out of the hole that fossil fuels are digging for us. So we have to focus in on shifting our economies away from a fossil fuel dependency. We've got to do it fast. South Africa is, through the department, has warmly welcomed the results of the 1.5 degree IPCC report, which really outlined the risks to us, and particularly to Africa and Southern Africa. So we've taken that on board, and these are the significant risks that we've got to do. We need to shift our economy away from these addictive fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I mean, the conversation now needs to be about how we need to move from exploiting nature to healing nature. I guess the million-dollar question is there political will to even go through this process of healing?
There's enormous political will, and activists around the world, particularly amongst the youth, have been very, very powerful in speaking truth to power. And the politicians need to listen, and we've even seen the judicial system taking action against Royal Dutch Shell, for example, and forcing them to reduce their emissions by about just under 50% by 2030. So fossil fuels are under fire. They're in the firing line, and any economy that is betting its future development on fossil fuels is playing a game that is out of date and will be left behind. And South Africa should really take note of this.
Yeah, Prof, we'll leave it there for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. So that's Professor Guy Midgley, climate scientist at Stellenbosch University.